This is a full breakdown of every single character inside of Poppy Playtime Chapter 4, all of their stories and important details in one video. This chapter was incredibly long, and because of that, it has a ton of new lore. This video will have parts of previous Chapter 4 videos that I've made, as well as some new stuff added in. So with that being said, let's dive into the lore of all of these experiments. Out of all the new characters in Poppy Playtime Chapter 4, there was one that stood out to me the most. One that shares with us just how difficult and scary it can be to become a bigger body. This character is Riley. Now, while there is only a few notes from her, there is still a lot to uncover with her character. She represents hope, and when you're in a situation like hers, hope is all you really have. So let's uncover every detail we can about Riley and her past.
This is my first week at Playcare. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't even know what I wanted it to be. The nice counselor who said I was quiet told me that I could say whatever I wanted in my journal. She said it might help me, so I'm going to try it.
Riley was a 12-year-old orphan girl that called Playcare home. What fascinates me the most about Riley is that she plays such a small role in the overall story. However, sometimes the smallest things can make the biggest impact. And Riley was an example of this. Even after her transformation, she lives by the same morals. Morals that would ultimately save others' lives. When we first learn about Riley, it's at the very beginning of the chapter. We enter the experiment graveyard with mountains of dead and even still alive toys. Considering this area is associated with death, it feels like direct foreshadowing for what's to come with Riley. Her story is presented in the form of journal entries. This notebook was given to her by one of the counselors and encouraged Riley to write her feelings, but to also make two lists. One with what was important to her then, and the other was for why. So with each note there are two lists, what's important and why. The first note we find is sitting on a barrel, and it tells us about when Riley arrived at Playcare and a bunch of details about her backstory. When she did first arrive, Riley didn't know what to expect. She didn't even know what she wanted it to be. She was given a room, a big pink bed, girly toys, and this journal. Interestingly though, Riley mentions how she feels too old for these things even though she's only 12. This sense of maturity in Riley is something we will see shine later on, so it's important. The staff would encourage Riley to talk with the other kids and make friends. However, this was challenging for Riley because she didn't know what to say to them. Most of the others had been at Playcare their whole lives, and as Riley says, they were young enough that they can't remember what they lost. This reminds us of just how young some of the orphans actually were. But remember, Riley is older, so she has memories of her past. Her parents loved, protected, and taught her. She then expresses how she doesn't know if the other kids even remember what that's like. They don't know what they don't have. But Riley does. She remembers a lot. This is slightly off-putting and makes you think about how a lot of the orphans were so young that all they knew was Playtime Co. This is also dark because it makes it easier for the company to take away their lives. They know nothing else. Riley would try and be nice to them, even if there wasn't much to say. But she preferred this, considering she was shy. Riley wrote down what was important to her at that moment. She notes how nice it was for the counselors to care enough about her to try to make her feel at home. This shows that the staff working with the kids did truly care about them. After all, they didn't know about the horrific acts that were taking place right beneath their feet. She also notes how it's important to try and get comfortable. This is her home now. How her life matters, since it can be lost so quickly, and her parents' lives mattered too. Why is this stuff important to her? Because Riley was scared. She notes how anything can happen in an instant and leave you with nothing. And because of that, she was scared that nothing matters. But she wants to feel happy again. And it's important to her that someone at Playcare cares that she feels at home, even if she knows she's not. This is incredibly sad. Clearly an accident happened that took the lives of Riley's parents. This explains why she is now at Playcare. But this accident has also shown Riley just how quickly life can be taken from you. And because of that, she is scared nothing matters. So it's important for her to have hope. Because right then, in that moment when she was writing this note, hope was all she had left.
I've been chosen. Dr. White chose me. For a while, I didn't know I wanted to be or how I'd feel if I was. But really, I think I'm happy. There were interviews, of course, but I didn't think any of those couples actually liked me. I was too anxious, too quiet, and didn't get along with the other kids. They'd often say, good test scores don't always make a good kid. But I guess somebody liked me.
The second journal entry details how Riley was chosen for an experiment. 5 months following her arrival at Playcare, other kids would talk about being chosen, but Riley didn't understand what it meant, questioning if it was just being adopted. She notes what was important to her, figuring out if she even wanted to be adopted, and trying to feel what the other kids felt every day. Why? Well, if she was happy like them, maybe she would appreciate everything more. Maybe she would want to be chosen too. This reveals the orphans saw being chosen as getting adopted. Unbeknownst to them, it was quite the opposite. But this also tells us Riley was unhappy with her life. It's clear she missed her parents and didn't want a life where she would have to call other adults mom and dad. However, a month later, Riley was chosen. Now, she had interviews with couples, but considering how shy and quiet Riley was, she thought they wouldn't like her. She did get good test scores at the game station, but to outsiders, this doesn't translate to being a good kid. If couples didn't care about Riley's scores, someone else did. That someone was Playtime Co. Meaning, because Riley had good test scores and no other couples wanted her, she was chosen. Riley wrote a few notes before she left, although she was able to bring this journal with her. She notes what was important, trying to be the girl her parents raised and to live by their values so that a part of them lives through her. She continues with being good, staying happy, and making more friends. It's important that she gets used to her new home. She wants to grow up to help kids like her, and even start her own orphanage just like Elliot Ludwig did. Fill it with toys and good people. This has shown growth in Riley. She is happy now and wants to help other kids like her when she becomes an adult. Little did Riley know about the truth behind the very orphanage she wanted to mirror. Nothing could prepare her for the horrors she was about to encounter in her so-called new home.
I'm not me anymore. My body is not my body. My hands are not my hands. I try to brush the hair I still feel on my shoulders and touch nothing. I can't separate my fingers, even though I can almost feel them move. It's like nothing of what I feel actually is.
The third journal entry is when things take a dark turn. Riley takes to her notes after her transformation. What happened wasn't what she thought. She was not adopted. They took her not out, but under, deep underneath everything. She recalled getting a shot and falling asleep, then talks about remembering images. Her skin was opened up like flower petals. A doctor digging around inside of her and taking things out. She could feel his touch through her ribs and into the back of her spine. Riley heard a snap and everything was red. This details just how gruesome the experiments were, and worst of all, the kids seemed to remember parts of it. When Riley woke, everything hurt. She screamed and screamed for hours, but stopped when realized no one was listening. Riley then explains how she is not herself anymore. Her body is not her body. Her hands are not her hands. She would try to brush the hair she still felt on her shoulders, but touched nothing. She wasn't even able to separate her fingers even though she could feel them move. She expresses how it's like nothing of what she feels actually is. And that's because it's not. The human brain is programmed to know and feel its own body parts. So when they are taken away, it still thinks they are there even when they're not. This is called phantom limb, and seems to be a side effect of the experiments. After Riley's experiment, she was put inside a room similar to the one she had at the orphanage. But now, everything was nailed down. They wouldn't want the experiments hurting themselves, now would they? Riley explains how writing this entry was difficult because of her hands. She wonders what the purpose of it was if she's just going to sit in a room alone. Riley then notes what's important to her in this moment as a confused bigger body. Waking up from this nightmare, getting out, and getting back to being herself. Why? Because she would start to feel like life again before this happened. It's clear that even after this horrific event, she still has hope. Like I said before, hope is all she really had. But she also remembers who she was, and this is important later on.
There are bodies everywhere. Piles and piles. They look like me. Oh God. Oh God. What's happening?
The fourth journal entry is Riley's perspective on the hour of joy. The room she was in started moving. She was scared. Something happened. Everything was upside down. A hole was blown in her room, but outside was loud. There was screaming everywhere. So she decided to wait it out because she felt safe in her room. Not even an hour later, things were quiet. So she went outside the room to see what happened. Then Riley notes, there are bodies everywhere. Piles and piles, they look like me. Riley was describing the aftermath of the hour of joy. After calming down, she went out to see if anyone was around. There was a man inside a construction vehicle. She tried to bang on the glass to get his attention, but this didn't work. He wasn't moving. This person was dead. So Riley returned to her room.
I don't know how little or how much my life mattered, but I could do this. This one thing. Maybe it'll save someone. Anyone. Even just one person. That would be enough. Nobody else should hear what I had to hear inside this place. Nobody else should know hell like this, or the demons that live inside. It's important to me that my life mattered to someone. Why? Because I'll know, wherever I go now, hopefully to my parents, that I fulfilled a little of what I said I would, and made life just a little better for someone else, even if this place took everything else.
The fifth note is the last time we will hear from Riley. She notes where she is, in the prison, and wonders why she's there if she's done nothing wrong. After all, they forcefully made her into a toy and put her into the cell. She didn't ask for any of this. She mentions there being hundreds, even thousands of others out there. How could this happen? This was Riley reflecting on the events leading up to that moment. There was no food, only the bodies, and she refused to eat them. Then, Riley decided to do something that truly showed who she really was as a person, even after the experiment. The train was what took everyone in and out of the prison. The dead conductor had a key for this train. Riley decided to take the key and put it where no one could find it, to make sure that no one else could get there. She didn't know how little or how much her life mattered, but this one act would make it matter more than she would ever know. By hiding the key from anyone else, she might be able to save someone. Anyone, even if it was just one person. To Riley, that would be enough. No one else should have to hear or see what she had witnessed. Nobody should ever have to experience hell like this or the demons that live there. Riley then notes what's important to her one last time. It's important that she helps someone the way she wanted to when she thought she was being adopted. It's important that her life mattered to someone. Why? So she knows that after her death, that she fulfilled a little of what she said she would, to help others. She wanted to make life just a little bit better for someone else, even if this place, Playtime Co., took everything. Riley would ultimately take the train key and presumably ingest it. If it's inside of her, no one else can get to it when she's alive. But her survival wouldn't last long, as she died doing exactly what she wanted, to help others and save a life by hiding the key. Her cause of death is unknown, and this is when we come across her to retrieve the key. There's blood everywhere and she looks to be torn apart. So maybe one of the other experiments found her and killed her because she wanted nothing to do with hurting others. Or she just died of starvation and her body has been decaying over the years. Either way, Riley died knowing her life mattered. The story of Riley might be the most fascinating, yet tragic story we have ever seen in the franchise. It's a shame it only comes from notes, but I think it adds to the sadness. These notes are all we have left of Riley. Everything, including her own life, was taken from her. The story also shows growth as a character. She came into her new life at Playtime Co. scared of what her future held. But hope is a powerful tool. And with hope, Riley was able to become happy again. She matured, wanting to help other kids like herself when she grew up. She wanted to do good, so her and her parents' lives mattered. But of course, Playtime Co. ripped this away from her. They turned her into a monster and left her to rot inside of a cell with no explanation. However, this is what makes Riley so special. She never lost hope. She hid the key in hopes to save a life. By doing this, she helped someone like she always wanted to, and above all, Riley's life mattered.
Something giving you the jitters might just be the nightmare critters. Come to play to gross you out in every way. We can't wait to wreck your day, so be very afraid.
The story behind the Nightmare Critters wasn't exactly presented in the chapter. However, we can piece a few things together given what we have. Now, we first encounter them inside the prison feeding on other dead toys. While exploring, Harley points out how fearful we look and sends out a bunch of Nightmare Critters to test us. Now, this hints that Dr. Harley Sawyer is in fact able to control the Nightmare Critters. At a moment's notice, they obey his every command. But of course, we survive the attack. Continuing on, you'll notice inside Safe Haven there are no Nightmare Critters. Not even any drawings of them on the wall. Well, that's because the Nightmare Critters are of course enemies to the Smiling Critters. They are their evil counterparts, if you will. However, at one point they did get along, but after the Hour of Joy, things presumably changed. Both groups seem to take different sides. The bigger body Smiling Critters with Poppy and the Nightmare Critters with Harley. That being said, we know the mini Smiling Critters obeyed the prototype. Now, we haven't seen any bigger body versions of the Nightmare Critters, so it's unknown if they were even a thing. However, I like to assume that there were. That being said, there seems to be 3 different sizes of these characters. The minis, a smaller size, and the bigger bodies, if there are any. However, I'm not sure if the small size is the same as the minis. I mean, clearly this one is bigger than the others, but it's not big enough to be a bigger body. So honestly, I'm not sure how to explain that. I guess there's just different sizes. So why are the Nightmare Critters evil? Well, it's the same reason as the other villainous characters, for revenge. As we progress, we do get a little more information about them. We fall into a pit with a bunch of cages, and inside said cages are the Nightmare Critters. Again, no signs of bigger bodies, they're just the mini or small ones. It seems they were all locked inside these cages, but why? Well, it's never explained. Although what is explained is their purpose. Harley says, "You think poor Yarnaby was my only pet." This reveals that Harley does in fact control the Nightmare Critters, all sizes. They act as his pet, just like Yarnaby was. Unfortunately, this is where their story ends. The Nightmare Critters are examples of mistreatment. They were controlled by Harley, locked away, just like many of the other experiments.
Pianosaurus, he plays just for us. We join the chorus. P-I-A-A-O-saurus, playing his scales from his teeth to his tail.
It would take an extinction level event to stop this late Cretaceous composer.
He's the Pianosaurus, he plays just for us. We join the chorus.
Pianosaurus' time in the chapter is by far the shortest. However, in my opinion, he's still a very interesting character, a type that we have never seen before. I won't go too much into his appearance, but he is clearly a big green dinosaur. Interestingly enough, his design is made up of a few different dinos, and of course, he is mixed with piano keys. These keys run from his mouth all the way down to his tail. The toy version of this character was originally released as part of a full set of musicians, meaning there are actually other musical animal toy hybrid characters that we just haven't learned about yet. Pianosaurus served as the harmony for the group, and is able to play musical notes through the keys he has as teeth. That being said, we do not see it, but he is able to open his mouth to eat. Now, within the prison is the containment zone, a place where the scientists would observe the experiments. In one of these rooms, we are able to find a prisoner profile for experiment 1163. Pianosaurus. It explains he displayed none of the typical human qualities. Whatever human mind was used for the experiment appears to be gone altogether. 1163 was mindless. His predecessor, 1160, theorized to be Boxubu, the first successful bigger body, had uses, but Pianosaurus lacked the cunningness and size for a similar role. He's then described as a rabid animal. It snaps at perceived emotion, eats whatever fits in its mouth regardless of his appetite, combats the conditioning staff, and it cannot even play its proper piano rhythms in tune. So he was deemed useless and only used for testing. This is horrific to think about. It means Pianosaurus would now be cut open and experimented on over and over until he dies. He would be the last musical hybrid of his kind. Despite all the testing, Pianosaurus did survive long enough to witness or be a part of the Hour of Joy, meaning he was let out of his cell for the event, but eventually he was put back inside because this is where we see him in chapter 4. As we walk across the ledge, we fall right into his cell. He turns around and we see his teeth or piano notes light up. However, we don't actually hear any noise from them. This could mean a few different things. He might have been experimented on so much that he no longer has the ability to make noise when he tries to. Or this isn't the Pianosaurus we saw in his teaser video, meaning there could be another one somewhere in the factory. But that's kind of a stretch. Either way, considering he acts as a rabid animal, he sees us as food and begins to charge. I'm sure we've been the only real food he's seen in a long time. Suddenly, Doey in his monstrous form comes in from behind and grabs Pianosaurus, smashes him against the walls, and eats him. When this is happening, we can hear the piano notes playing, which is interesting considering what I just said. The last thing we see of him is his head as it slides over from the shadows. The rest of him will remain inside Doey's stomach. I have to quickly mention one more thing. Besides wasting this character with 30 seconds of screen time, I think it can actually be a testament at how quickly Playtime Co. can take away who you really are. Pianosaurus was likely just an innocent orphan. One day, he was put to sleep and woke up inside of a toy, showing no signs of his past life. Just like that, the orphan's life was gone. This kind of resembles what happened in the chapter. We see Pianosaurus, and just like that, he's gone.
The fun never ends. Cozy and cuddly, your new best friend, Yarnaby.
I love braiding his hair.
He'll hold you close and keep you there,
He watches over me when I sleep.
protecting your dreams. The fun never ends. Cozy and cuddly, your new best friend, Yarnaby.
The toy version of Yarnaby resembles that of a lion. He has a heart of gold and a smile that touches your soul. He was released in the 1970s as part of a wildlife conservation campaign. This reveals there are others that are in that campaign, potentially more Yarn characters, but that's just my guess. Now, since the 1970s, Yarnaby has seen regular releases all throughout the years, so I think it's safe to say that he was a very popular character amongst the kids and fans of the company. Now, the backstory of the bigger body version to Yarnaby was already explained in the ARG, but I'll touch on it here as well. Quinn Davidson was an orphan living at Playcare and gained notoriety amongst the staff for his abnormal behavior and mediocre performance at the game station. Quinn was different, rather slightly off-putting, as he enjoyed cutting the heads off of dolls and rearranging them to make them pretty. This behavior soon attracted the eye of Dr. Harley Sawyer, but Quinn seemed to be hiding his true potential considering just how artistic he really was. Harley confronted Quinn about this and requested Quinn give it his all during his next test. Quinn agreed, and when his next series of tests arrived, he achieved top scores. Quinn did exactly what Dr. Harley Sawyer asked him to do. In August of 1990, Quinn Davidson was selected to become the bigger body of Yarnaby, also known as Experiment 1166. Following the procedure, Yarnaby displayed strange indications of loyalty to select members of the security staff. Sawyer figured out that this meant Yarnaby could be molded as he saw fit, so he had Yarnaby isolated from everyone but him. This led Yarnaby to form an attachment. He saw Harley as his master, so he intended to use Yarnaby as a personal guard dog. However, Harley ended up abandoning Yarnaby, which caused him to lapse into an unresponsive, unmotivated state. Therefore, Yarnaby was deemed a failure and left left alone to rot inside of a cell. After the hour of joy, Harley released Yarnaby and convinced him to obey his old master and keep him safe. When we, the player, are first introduced to the character, Harley expresses that we are different. We have taken out all of the other toys, so he sends out something different of his own. Yarnaby, aka his guard dog. He runs out and scratches the glass, headbutts it, and lets out a big roar. From these actions, it's clear Yarnaby is a ferocious being. He wants nothing more than to attack, or rather just protect his master, Harley. The way he acts perfectly mimics how an aggressive guard dog would act. Within the next few areas, we need to sneak by Yarnaby and not raise attention. One thing to note here is that Yarnaby can't actually smell. He is only able to attack if he sees us. Most lions or dogs would be able to sniff out their prey, but Yarnaby is unable to do this. This could be a flaw in his bigger body design, or I'm overthinking it. Either way, I felt it was important to point out. During the cat and mouse game with Yarnaby, while he is looking for us, he will open his mouth and you can hear a sort of jingle. Unfortunately, this jingle is never elaborated on, but it could be the pathetic noises Harley mentioned in his prisoner profile document. During the final chase, Yarnaby attempts to jump over the incinerator, gets caught on the chain, and catches fire. He frees himself from the hook, only to fall deep into the void while burning alive. This is where Yarnaby's story ends, a poor guard dog that lost his life trying to please his master.
Doey the Doughman!
He stretch you, he scum you, he squish you, he's fun you. D-O-E-Y. He's seal you, he's glue you, he's stick you, he's glue you. D-O-E-Y.
Look at all the colors.
So many toys and one. Triple times the friend and triple times the fun. D-O-E-Y. Love it till the day that you die.
Call the number on screen and order your Doey today. Order now while supplies last. Shipping and handling costs may vary. Do not ingest Doey or any products in the Doey line.
Doey originally hit the market in the late 1950s. He was Playtime Co.'s second major big hit. Over time, Doey was revamped and reinvigorated for each new decade. He was truly a timeless character. What made him so special was that he was made from dough. With Doey, you could let your imagination run wild, or just keep him as Doey. Because of how successful the toy had been over the years, of course he would be added to the Bigger Bodies initiative. However, Doey would become something special. Instead of using one orphan, Doey would be crafted using 3 different boys, each with their own distinctive personalities, hence the 3-arm design on his body. This would allow him to have multiple purposes considering he could shapeshift. Doey was known as Experiment 1322, and the 3 boys were all labeled with A, B, and C.
We've successfully extracted subject 1322, specifically 1322B from the Home Sweet Home. Before said interruption, I attempted to detail the subject's condition and overview the suitability of one Kevin Barnes in relation to Project Doey. The neural abnormalities noted in Dr. Newman's report are detailed in connection to behavioral issues demonstrated within play care. Trouble getting along with others, aggressive and often confrontational social tendencies, and an otherwise combative nature clearly relay that Kevin is, put simply, a problem child. What friends he does have, he's reported to have attacked in moments of intense play. These tendencies raise concerns. The subject excels in all physical tests. Reflexes, reaction time, and mental fortitude all tested well above average in game station examinations. So, in spite of said concerns, in Dr. Sawyer's eyes, Kevin is ideal for the project. However, if his use in this particular experiment is to move forward, we need to ensure we're not creating a time bomb just as we've begun stabilizing the entire project. If we're to create an experiment that can fulfill multiple assigned roles, we can't allow any single consciousness to throw the others off. Even a simple misregulation of emotions means we have 900 pounds of dough that can shift however it pleases and can turn on even those it trusts, simply because it was overwhelmed by a stray feeling. Regardless, Sawyer's word is law, and subjects 1322A and C are to be gathered for processing first thing tomorrow morning. Thus, all we can do is plan our safeguards accordingly. Yes, that's all we can do.
1322A was known as Jack Ayers, who had gotten a tour at the Playtime Co. factory for Christmas, alongside a Doey the Doughman toy. While on this tour inside the dough mixing room, Jack staggered behind the group. He leaned a little too far over the railing and fell into a vat of dough. To save him, not wanting to waste a life, Playtime Co. used him for Doey. Now, Jack's longing for his parents and normal life is often reflected in Doey amongst his cries throughout Chapter 4. 1322B was Kevin Barnes, a temperamental boy known for throwing tantrums and hurting everyone around him when overwhelmed, even his friends. For some reason, Harley decided this personality would be perfect for Doey. Kevin can be seen when Doey gets filled with rage in the chapter. He would lash out towards everyone, even his own allies. The last boy was a smart, well-mannered teenager named Matthew Hallard, 1322C, a dream child. He would always take care of those around him, making some of the scientists hesitant about wasting him on an experiment. Matthew's personality shines through Doey as he guides survivors inside Safe Haven as their leader. He always presents himself as strong and reliable, giving hope to the survivors. When we meet Doey, he is extremely kind and even helps us safely make it to Safe Haven. But throughout the story, he is hesitant with Poppy's plan. He doesn't want to see the toys die because they are people too, not just monsters. After they're all taken out and Safe Haven gets destroyed by the prototype, Doey gets overwhelmed. He fills with rage, guilt, and sorrow, the three boys' personalities, as he transforms into a monster with 3 heads. These represent the 3 boys. We are eventually forced to kill Doey, and when doing so, he takes his last breath to apologize for his actions, reminding us that, like he said before, these monsters are people too. One of the biggest questions I had leading up to Chapter 4 was, is Poppy actually evil? I think a large majority of the fanbase collectively agreed that she was, or will be in some way. I mean, there is plenty of evidence to support this. However, after Chapter 4, I'm not entirely sure anymore what side she's on. I mean, there's even a propaganda poster suggesting that Poppy will lead everyone to the grave. Is this true? Honestly, it's complicated, but let's try to see if we can't figure out just how evil Poppy really is. In my previous video questioning if she's evil or not, I suggested that Poppy sent us the letter and put herself in the case to trick us. We would see her as a damsel in distress and want to help, when in reality, it would have just been to lure us into the factory and take advantage of us for the prototype's gain, whatever that may be. Why? Because I think the prototype is Elliot Ludwig, Poppy's father. Now, after playing Chapter 4, part of what I suggested was true, but I feel a lot differently now considering the new information we have. Poppy revealed through a VHS tape that Elliot Ludwig is in fact her father, and a few other details I'll talk about later. There were also certain things the prototype said to Poppy that could mean he is Elliot. I feel like he is the only other significant human left that could have been used for the prototype's experiment. He can't be Leith Pierre because Leith named the prototype in a catnap VHS tape.
We'll let you out here and there to go see the kids in play care, but your home is here. And as for the prototype, his home is in the labs.
Meaning the prototype was already created while Leith was alive. But the prototype being Elliot is important, that's why I bring it up. So let's take a look at Poppy's plan, because it will help us decide if she's really a bad person or not. She explains it when we first enter Safe Haven. She wants to save these still alive orphans and destroy the prototype by any means necessary. Once us, her, and Kissy have freed the orphans, Doey and everyone else will blow the factory sky high. That's our, rather her, revenge. But you might have noticed the flaw in this plan. Doey and all of the other friendly toys will also be destroyed along with the prototype. Poppy doesn't even mention them leaving with us. So this in itself could suggest she is evil depending on how you look at it. I mean, she's willing to kill the other innocent toys to stop the prototype. This is why Doey stresses his disagreement with her plan. As he said himself, they're people too.
It's the best for everyone, Doey, that no trace of this place is left. We
We're not just things gone wrong. We're people. Can't you see that?
Now, Harley also pleads to us that Poppy is the bad person in the story. While inside the morgue area, Harley tries to convince us that what Poppy is doing is going to get everyone hurt. He stresses how she sold us her story, then reveals she knew about the Hour of Joy. She knew it was going to happen. Harley continues how Poppy has just been stringing us along, betrayed us, and has only told us what we needed to know to do exactly what she asks. All she wants is violence. Once the experiments were free, instead of leaving, they created hell. Seems pretty convincing, right? Like I said before, this is Harley trying to assure us that Poppy is the villain. But it doesn't stop there. Later on, he continues by suggesting she doesn't actually care for us. She would sacrifice us in an instant if she believed it meant getting what she wanted. The only difference between her and Harley is what he fights for gains humanity something. This line from Harley is the most important. You see, Harley knows that Poppy's plan to stop the prototype is going to kill the remaining experiments, his creations. Harley doesn't want his work to be for nothing. If Poppy destroys everything, the Bigger Bodies Initiative will be gone. This is what he meant by saying he fights for gaining humanity something. Harley thinks the Bigger Bodies Initiative will save humanity by giving humans immortality. This is why Harley has been trying to convince us that Poppy is the real villain. He doesn't want her to destroy everything he built. This also explains the Poppy propaganda poster. This was Harley's doing to try to convince the other toys that Poppy would lead them to their death. Which he's not entirely wrong. Even after killing Harley, his last words are "You saved no one." If Poppy's plan works, almost all of the experiments will die. So with that being said, what do we know so far? Why was what Harley said about her important? Well, Poppy's plan is to destroy the prototype, but at the cost of all of the other experiments. What Harley said about Poppy wasn't entirely wrong. He was right, however, he was only acting this way because he wanted to save his creations and the Bigger Body Initiative. So I'm still on the fence about Poppy. Fortunately, the ending of the game reveals a few more details that will help us out. The prototype says he's going to come get Poppy and kill everyone else. After all, Elliot wouldn't want to lose his daughter for a second time. Now, Poppy goes on about how the prototype lied to her, and he says it's because she kept missing the point. The prototype continues, revealing that he put Poppy in her case in hopes that she would see things differently. This proves the other part of my video wrong. Poppy didn't put herself in the case. It's always been about her and him, what they are. That's not a truth that can be burnt away. Those three lines are extremely important, but to understand what this all means, we need to take a look at Poppy's VHS tape again. This tape seems to be a place where the experiments can vent, if you will. It allows them to express their feelings, because sometimes you just need to get something out. I say this because Doey has a tape just like this. It's kind of like a confession tape. She starts by saying it was awful, this wasn't what she thought they were going to leave the factory, not this. Poppy is talking about the Hour of Joy, meaning the prototype convinced Poppy that the Hour of Joy was going to allow all of the experiments to leave. This is what Harley was talking about when he said Poppy knew about the Hour of Joy. But the toys never left. The prototype lied to Poppy to get her on his side. After it went down, after Poppy met with him again, he told her they can't leave the factory. Not now, not ever. She then goes on about how she hates him for this, and she hates that he's right. The experiments can't leave. It's too risky. They can never let what happened to them happen to anyone else. Why is the prototype right about not leaving? Because if the toys leave, the Bigger Bodies Initiative will not stop. Other scientists will just continue Harley's work. This also means the prototype might actually not be a bad guy. He just wants to stop the experiments from continuing. Yes, the toys killed people during the Hour of Joy, but to the prototype it had to be done for the greater good. Something had to change for the experiments to stop. The prototype is not a villain. He never was. Which means he took the orphans to preserve their lives. They are asleep, while the prototype figures out a plan to keep them alive forever without turning them into toys. At least that's my idea for his plan. After all, even if the kids leave, word of what happened will get out. This explains why he put Poppy in her case. She was trying to escape the factory after he lied to her. The prototype has been trying to stop anyone, even the other toys, from escaping, even if it means killing them. This is why he wants to kill us, Kissy, and the rest of the friendly toys. It's not because he's evil, it's because he just wants to stop the experiment. experiments. So why is all that important? Well, this was the point he said Poppy was missing, the bigger picture. And like I said before, at the end of the tape, Poppy reveals that her father is Elliot Ludwig, which brings us back to their conversation, what they are. Father and daughter. That cannot be burnt away. So all of that being said, we know Poppy's plan, we know why Harley was saying she's evil, and we know the prototype is likely not the bad guy. To answer the question, is Poppy evil? No, I don't think she is. But let me explain. If Poppy and the prototype are father and daughter, I don't think it matters to Poppy anymore. I don't think she's trying to help him with a master plan, considering everything I just said about him. I suggested she was evil because she wanted to help him, but after chapter 4, it seems like they don't want the same thing. I think Poppy truly hates the prototype. This is why she doesn't address him as her father. She is ashamed and doesn't see him as such. She thinks that the prototype is trying to keep them locked away forever, when in reality, he's just trying to put a stop to everything. Poppy is a child. She doesn't fully understand the bigger picture. So, filled with anger and hatred, she just wants him gone so she can leave, even if it means sacrificing the other toys. Poppy misses being a real girl, and she thinks by leaving the factory, she will get her life back. However, we know that's not going to happen. So, I want to ask the question one more time. Is Poppy evil? Who is truly the bad person here? The one trying to put an end to everything Playtime Co. has done? Or the one whose plan will kill innocent lives and let Playtime Co.'s secrets out? That's a tough one, but remember, she's just a kid, so I think it's a moral dilemma. Technically, Poppy is not evil, but is she doing the right thing? Well, I'll let you decide. By now, everyone knows what happened at the end of chapter 3, so I won't spend too much time talking about it, but I need to point out a few details. We head down with Poppy and leave Kissy to pull the lever. The plan was, once we were down, Poppy would go back up for Kissy. However, as we are descending, we hear screaming and Kissy gets attacked. Therefore, we don't really know who or what attacked her, but the screaming is important, so keep it in mind. This brings us to the beginning of chapter 4. While on the elevator, Poppy tells us to go on without her, so she can go back and help Kissy. She won't leave her behind. I think it's important to note here the relationship Poppy and Kissy have. They've seemed to stay together after all these years, and no matter what, they always protect each other. Obviously excluding when Poppy was in her case. A true friendship to say the least. However, this friendship will be tested later on. Now, while navigating through the prison, inside one of the cells is a weekly checkup for experiment 1172, otherwise thought to be Kissy Missy. This is obviously not confirmed, but the checkup heavily hints at it being Kissy. I mean, Huggy Wuggy was experiment 1170, so it would make sense for Kissy to be 1172. Now, this does mean there was a 1171, another version of Kissy perhaps? Who knows? As I was saying, this checkup shows improvement for Kissy. It states the reason for observation: emotional dysregulation, overactive autonomic nervous system, meaning an acute response to stress, as well as episodes consisting of shaking, heavy breathing, and decreased concentration. In other words, Kissy was extremely skittish. Her report states when she was given writing implements, she communicated high levels of stress, feeling impending doom, and a strong desire to return to her previous living quarters. These are all things we have seen through Kissy Missy's body language throughout the chapters. She always looks nervous and scared. It's as if she doesn't want to be there anymore. Considering how she acted, it seemed 1172 was ultimately useless if she couldn't complete her assigned tasks. However, she had shown gradual but steady improvements. The staff noticed a drop in the number of emotional episodes, as well as a shortened duration when they do occur. Kissy was becoming more stable. One factor for this improvement was because of scheduled periods of supervised socialization with other subjects. This measure was personally requested by Stella Graber, and had positive impacts on not only Kissy, but several other subjects. Who would have thought that not being alone all the time would have a positive mental result? Remember, these experiments are people too, and humans are social beings. I think this is an example of how Playtime Co. doesn't see them as such. To the company, these experiments are objects. They don't care about how they feel. If one of them shows negative results, they just throw them away. However, it's good to know that there was at least one good person amongst the staff. As I would say, Stella was one of the only staff members that saw the experiments as real people.
I took this job because I wanted to help change kids' lives for the better. Of course, these procedures are far from ideal. I cried like a baby when I read them. But I started looking past the here and now. Started looking down the road a bit. And that's when it clicked. What your researchers can do down here will someday help a lot of people out there. Including so many kids. That's a bigger and better change than I could ever have hoped to make. That's a change I want to help make.
I knew you'd understand.
And this act from her proves that. It notes that 1172 would rub the fur on her arms, most likely unconsciously in response to stress. Of course, we have seen this before from Kissy. The report concludes that if 1172 continues to improve, she will not need corrective intervention. In other words, will not need to be experimented on anymore. While still reporting negative feelings, she was back to a fully functional state. Staff recommended she do physical work in a quiet setting. So this report tells us that Kissy had always been in a state of distress. I mean, I can't really blame her. It makes you wonder if the orphan she once was acted like this as well. At this point, we still don't know what happened to Kissy after her attack. We haven't seen or heard from Poppy. However, on our way to Safe Haven, Kissy grabs us and pulls us into a crack in the wall, which completely catches us off guard. This reveals that she did in fact survive, although she is pretty beat up, but I will talk about this more in a moment. Poppy tells us to stay quiet as the prototype walks by. After he passes, the three of us safely make it to Safe Haven. Now, following Doey and Poppy's conversation, it's implied that the prototype was the one who actually attacked Kissy Missy at the end of chapter 3. The screaming we heard from her was not the attacker, it was actually Kissy herself, which makes sense because her screaming is similar to Huggy Wuggy's. When Poppy went back up to help Kissy, the prototype followed them down to Safe Haven. This explains why they were hiding in the wall. It was because the prototype was following them. This is further suggested when Doey gets upset, pointing out that Poppy brought the prototype down here. So to answer the question of who attacked Kissy Missy, it was the prototype. After taking out Catnap, it seemed the prototype wanted to take matters into his own hands, but he wasn't fast enough as Kissy was the only one still above. Now, as we can see, Kissy Missy is very beat up. She's wearing an arm splint, something that helps broken bones, which is kind of weird considering the way her arm can bend. I don't think there are bones in there, but who knows. She also looks to be burnt. This could hint that the prototype has some kind of flamethrower attachment built onto him, or she is just very dirty and scraped up after being presumably thrown around. Either way, she is in a very bad state and needs to rest to heal, which kind of reveals that the experiments are able to heal themselves like a normal human body would. So Kissy sits down in a makeshift bed to get some rest. Here, Poppy tells us about her plan, and I bring it up because she plans to stop the prototype, but at the cost of all the other experiments' lives. However, she mentions keeping Kissy alive. Another example of their friendship, and like I said before, this friendship will be tested as we reach the end of the chapter. At some point after Kissy felt better, her and Poppy left Safe Haven together. We know this because when we return later, the place is destroyed and the other toys are dead. Now, we actually run into the two sitting in a ventilation block while Poppy is trying to contact Ollie, rather the prototype. During the conversation with Poppy and the prototype, it's important to pay attention to Kissy's body language. She sits relaxed at first, and when the prototype reveals himself to be Ollie, she leans back in fear and begins to shake. Just the sound of the prototype's voice makes Kissy fearful. This shaking is a trait we saw in her weekly checkup, another example of her being experiment 1172. She then puts herself in a sort of fetal position, which is a direct response to fear. When faced with extreme stress, our bodies naturally resort to this self-soothing fetal position. In other words, we are trying to make ourselves as small as possible to hide, and we see this in Kissy as she continues to bunch herself up. But when Poppy begins to cry, Kissy actually opens up and gets a little closer to Poppy. This is Kissy's fight or flight response. She senses her friend is in distress, which causes her to gain courage and want to help, even if it's only by a small amount. She continues to watch Poppy in concern when Poppy suddenly runs away. She was so afraid of returning to her case that she seemed to abandon her friend, a friend that would do anything for her. This is what I was talking about when questioning their friendship. Why would Poppy abandon Kissy like this when she went back to save her life earlier? The prototype even mentions Poppy being a bad friend for leaving. I guess the fear of being in the case was enough for Poppy to lose it. So I'm not sure, but considering how close they are, it's an interesting detail to think about. Suddenly the explosives go off. Kissy grabs us, however we are too heavy for her newly injured arm as it rips off and we fall down. You'll notice that she didn't actually fall though, meaning Kissy Missy is very much still alive, and will return in chapter 5. We can assume she is going to go back and find Poppy as a true friend would. This is where Kissy Missy's story in chapter 4 comes to an end. I think it's important to note that Kissy has always been a friendly character not only to Poppy, but to us. She helped us in almost every chapter now, and you could even say she saved our life in chapter 4. She is always anxious and scared. She just wants her life back, just like all of the other experiments. It makes me wonder if she is going to survive as the story continues, but I don't think she will. I think her story will be an example of the many orphans that lost their lives to Playtime Co., regardless of how nice and caring they were. Kissy is a truly good soul, and as the story continues, that soul will be ripped away. Dr. Harley Sawyer was quite literally the brain of the Bigger Bodies initiative for Playtime Co. Without him, it would have never worked. He was so important that they decided to keep him there forever. This is when we meet him in chapter 4. While his presence left much to be desired, there is still a lot to be said about his character. So let's take a closer look at the Doctor. I feel it's only right to explain just how Harley became this infamous all-seeing eye before we jump into the chapter. Lucky for us, there are a few VHS tapes to help us out. The first one is a conversation between Leith, Eddie, and Stella. They all agree Harley Sawyer has become a problem for the company, and he needs to be dealt with. But they can't kill him, he is too valuable. So Leith Pierre decides to do something that would show his true colors. They took Harley and uploaded his consciousness to Playtime Co.'s database using his brain and organs. Which brings us to the second tape when Harley wakes up. At first he is confused, but quickly realizes the situation he's in, calling them backstabbers. Harley has become a subject to his own procedure. He was reduced to organs, stored and kept alive within vital system centers scattered around the factory. He yells at Dr. White for doing this to him, when suddenly Leith Pierre chimes in and tells Harley that he gave the order for this to happen. Leith then explains what's going to happen next. From then on, Harley would be used to give answers to the lab scientist and help them whenever it's needed. That's it. He would be an open book for them whenever they want it. Leith continues by telling Harley to fight or give in. It doesn't really matter because either way, they own the very infrastructure he is wired to. Meaning Dr. Harley Sawyer will now be a servant to Playtime Co. for the rest of his life. He is from there on out a digital entity. When we, the player, first learn about Harley, he presents himself over the TV inside a prison cell. He mentions feeling something squirming its way beneath his skin. An intrusive foreign little germ after all this time. As we know, the first few layers of the factory were just scratching the surface of the entire facility, meaning we were just scratching the surface of Harley himself. The deeper we go, the deeper we enter inside the mind of Harley Sawyer. This is his turf, there are no places to hide. So he sends us into the prison to see how we fare. A little game, as he said himself. As we navigate through the dark remnants of the prison cells, Harley points out how lost and disoriented we look. Heavy breathing is indicative of fear, so Harley decides to test this response to fear by sending out a horde of mini nightmare critters. This tells us a few different things. First, Harley has full control over the nightmare critters. At a moment's notice, they will obey his every command. But this also tells us Harley will be watching our every move, as he has been watching us since chapter 1. Now, when we enter one of the containment zone rooms, Harley mentions he never thought he would see another like us, a human, certainly not an employee, which is interesting because he doesn't say what type of employee we actually are, as this still remains a mystery. But he says something makes us different, he's not sure what. However, we were able to take out the other experiments, so we must be special. Harley himself decides to try something different and brings out Yarnaby. As we know, Yarnaby acts as Harley's guard dog. Since we are getting closer, he sends out Yarnaby to help protect him. Harley also mentions he will be taking notes. I don't think this was just a little joke. I think he will actually be taking notes on how Yarnaby performs, taking notes on how effective Yarnaby really is. That being said, I believe Harley has been actively studying how each experiment performed when attacking us. After all, they are his creations. This is something a scientist would do. While inside Safe Haven, Doey gives us a little rundown of Harley, as well as a very important detail. He tells us Harley was the scientist in charge of creating them, which of course we already knew. But then Doey confirms Harley is working for the prototype. That being said, there is a VHS tape with a conversation between Harley and the prototype.
Your suggestions?
To produce the results I'm after. Have I made an error in allowing your survival? Of course not. We just need more time to perfect that. Time is precisely what we do not have. Then I suggest you find some more. That will give me labs access. At least with the two of us.
That is out of the question.
You Mr. Bot. The situation necessitates it be done quickly. I'm just giving you the facts. And the fact is, we need more time, or this isn't going to work. I can only be reactive up here. Then of what use are you? You know I'm still your best shot at cracking that secret. If I weren't, you would have already killed me. A sound observation. Yes. You have made yourself useful. Provide me more options. I will try again. Of course.
But
If you are stalling, or worse, remember,
your usefulness
is the only reason you were not stripped for meat and spare parts.
This tape reveals that the prototype is only keeping Harley around, rather alive, because he needs him for something. He also mentions Harley is not allowed in the labs. Why? Because the labs are where the still alive orphans are located. And like I've said in all of my other Chapter 4 videos, the prototype is not the bad guy. He is not trying to hurt the orphans. The prototype is keeping them away from Harley to protect them. That being said, why is the prototype keeping Harley alive? What is this secret they are trying to crack? Well, it's immortality. The prototype is using Harley to give the orphans immortality without turning them into bigger bodies. At least that's what makes the most sense to me, as I've explained this in other videos. After our final encounter with Yarnaby, Harley speaks to us again, seeing us just as he expected. Meaning Harley expected us to get past Yarnaby. He expected us to kill him. It makes you wonder if it's been Harley's plan all along to get rid of Yarnaby, considering he abandoned him before the Hour of Joy. Either way, Harley mentions we are every bit of what the prototype fears. We are strong, as no experiment has been able to stop us. But Harley can't remember seeing our face before, and wonders why we came back. Was there someone we loved here? Someone we lost? Or was it the pain of not knowing what happened? It's always been a theory that the player had something to do with the Bigger Bodies initiative. After all, in Chapter 3, it's heavily implied that we returned because of guilt. We are guilty for being a part of the experiments. So now we have returned to help what's left and hope to clear our conscience. But Harley says he doesn't remember seeing us. You would think he would remember every employee that was a part of this initiative. So I'm not entirely sure why he doesn't, but it's an interesting detail to point out. Now, in order to stop Harley, we are tasked with destroying the organs that are keeping him alive. The first is inside the morgue. Here, in an attempt to stop us, Harley pleads to us that Poppy is the bad person, not him. He stressed how she sold us her story, then reveals she knew about the Hour of Joy. She knew it was going to happen. Harley continues how Poppy has just been stringing us along, betrayed us, and has only told us what we needed to know to do exactly what she asks. All she wants is violence. Once the experiments were free, instead of leaving, they created hell. But like I said before, this is Harley trying to convince us that Poppy is the villain. Obviously, this doesn't stop us, so we destroy his lungs. The Poppy slander doesn't stop there. Later on, he continues by suggesting she doesn't actually care about us. She would sacrifice us in an instant if she believed it meant getting what she wanted. The only difference between her and Harley is what he fights for gains humanity something. This line from Harley is the most important. You see, Harley knows that Poppy's plan to stop the prototype is going to kill the remaining experiments. In other words, kill his creations. Harley doesn't want his work to be for nothing. If Poppy destroys everything, the Bigger Bodies Initiative will be gone. This is what he meant by saying he fights for gaining humanity something. Harley thinks the Bigger Bodies Initiative will save humanity by giving humans immortality, which relates back to why the prototype is keeping him alive. So this is why Harley has been trying to convince us that Poppy is the real villain. He doesn't want her to destroy everything he built, which also explains the Poppy propaganda poster. This was Harley trying to convince the other toys that Poppy will lead them to their death, which he's not entirely wrong. Next, we get a little more information about the nightmare critters and Harley. We fall into an area filled with cages and a shock treatment zone. Inside said cages are the nightmare critters. It seems this is where they have been locked away. This room also explains the experiments would go through shock treatment. Another example of Playtime Harley's sinister acts. As we fall down, Harley says, "You think poor Yarnaby was my only pet," as a mini-ish Bubba Chops begins to chase us. After painstakingly surviving the attack, we enter a room with another nightmare critter trapped inside the same machine Harley's organs are in. He asks if we believe we are taking the moral high road with everything we're doing. He explains how survival necessitates choices, difficult choices. So Harley gives us a choice. If we want to leave, it will come at a cost. We either kill the innocent nightmare critter and leave, or we stay and die. A choice of morals, but of course, we kill the critter. Besides being filler for the chapter, this was a test from Harley, as he has been trying to convince us that Poppy is the real enemy. If we choose to finish her plan, we take out the prototype, but at the cost of innocent lives. So with this test, we have a similar situation. We can leave, but at the cost of an innocent life. Harley is trying to show us that we are no better than Poppy and her plan. After destroying the second organ, we head to where the doctor's brain resides. The last piece to the puzzle. It's hooked up to a different machine than the others. This is because it's his brain, the most important organ. However, he takes control of an android and throws us down underneath. This room is filled with countless other robots that Harley is able to control. These robots allow him to interact with the real world. I have to also point out that there is no explanation for how they were made. Since Harley was a digital entity, it would be impossible to physically build one on his own. So we can only assume the prototype made the first one, which allowed Harley to take physical form and build more. This would explain how and why there are a ton of them. Now, with each computer powered, we get closer and closer to overloading his brain. Once all of them are on, we head back upstairs to do just that. We overload Harley's brain and destroy it. Harley's last words are, "You saved no one." This was his last attempt to try and convince us that Poppy's plan will get everyone killed. But was this truly Harley's last moments? Could he still be alive? After all, he did say meat could be replaced. Well, that's a theory for a different video. With that, Harley's story in chapter 4 comes to an end. So what was Harley trying to do this whole time? Why was he significant to the chapter? Well, there are a few different reasons. First, his role with the prototype. Harley was kept alive to try and create immortality for the orphans. But more importantly, for the sake of the actual chapter, he spends most of his time trying to convince us, the player, that Poppy is the real villain here. Her plan to stop the prototype will get everyone killed. But why would Harley care about this? Why does he care about the experiment so much? Well, they are his creations. Remember, what he fights for gains humanity something. If Poppy's plan works, the Bigger Bodies Initiative will be burnt away, and all of Harley's work will have been for nothing. He doesn't care for the actual experiments. He only cares for the success of the Bigger Bodies Initiative. He is truly a narcissistic mad scientist that will forever rot in the very hell he created for the rest of time.
You're not supposed to be here. This is the single most high security, high clearance section of the whole factory. When someone finds you down here, you will be shot. And before you get any ideas, don't think you can just sneak away either. No, the second you put this tape in, it set off an alarm. So if anyone's home, they know exactly where you are. Pretty nifty, huh? Security is very important to us here. If I were you, I'd start running.
The return of Huggy Wuggy was heavily hinted at leading up to Chapter 4, so it was cool to see him finally return. Now, before Chapter 4, the last we saw of him, he chased us through the vents and fell from the catwalks, plummeting into the deep depths of the Playtime Co. factory, a place where darkness was the least of your worries. So it seemed Huggy was gone for good. However, in Chapter 2, blood and blue fur could be seen leading into a vent. Either Huggy was able to crawl his way to safety, or the prototype found him and saved his life. The second option would make more sense since we've seen the prototype do this before with Catnap, although he killed Catnap. Which leads to the question of why didn't the prototype kill Huggy? Well, to answer this, let's take a look at what Huggy was designed for. Security. It was his job to watch over the factory. This was told to us by Leith Pierre in Chapter 1 as he calls Huggy a security measure. This explains why Huggy even attacked us. We were trespassing, therefore Huggy came to stop us. So, that being said, the prototype kept Huggy alive so he could do his job again. Security for Playtime Co.'s darkest secrets. With Huggy back, he could guard the prototype and, more importantly, the labs. And to try and stop the player again. This brings us to the entrance of the labs, where we watch a top secret tape that is very similar to the first tape from Chapter 1. Leith Pierre jokingly tells whoever is watching this to head inside the labs for help because they must be lost, when in reality this will get them killed, and he confirms this. If you are found down here, you will be shot. This tape also sets off a security alarm, so there is no way to escape. They know exactly where you are. Of course, the company's best security measure takes place as Huggy Wuggy runs up to the door, revealing his return. A true full circle moment from Chapter 1. So it seems in Chapter 5 we will need to defeat Huggy again to finally face the prototype. Or, just maybe, Huggy will return to the good side and help us. Just like Darth Vader did in Star Wars.
Something's gone horribly wrong. The safe haven...
Shelf ventilation block B6. Is this where you are, Poppy?
What?
Stay where you are.
And listen closely. You're not going to run. You're not going to fight. The charade is over.
Who is this?
Obvious question with an obvious answer.
The prototype is still a character we know very little about. However, thanks to Chapter 4, we got some hints at what he might look like and his master plan. Before entering Safe Haven, Kissy and Poppy pull us into a crack in the wall when suddenly the prototype walks by. Unfortunately, we only see his silhouette. There is no actual model in the game. But this does tell us he walks on 6 metal spider-like legs, and he is extremely tall. Therefore, the labs must be huge for him to fit inside. Now, that's not the only hint we get about his appearance in the chapter. As we know, it was the prototype that attacked Kissy Missy. I talked about this during Kissy's part in the video, but we can see she looks to be burnt. The prototype somehow caught Kissy on fire, which means he might have a flamethrower attached to him. This does seem a little far-fetched, until we look at the drawings on the wall in Safe Haven. On one side, he has the classic claw we have been seeing in the chapters with blue and orange colors. On the other side, we can see the same blue and orange along with, not a claw, but presumably a flamethrower attachment. So I would say it's safe to assume the prototype can shoot flames, which will ultimately burn everything down at the end of Chapter 5. All that being said, what is the prototype's master plan here? Well, let's take a look at his conversation with Poppy towards the end of the chapter. At this moment, it's revealed that Ollie was actually the prototype, meaning when we spoke with him in Chapter 3, this was the prototype. It's cool to see a general fan-based theory actually be true. Now, for some reason, the prototype has wanted us to get closer and closer. I'm not sure why, but maybe he wanted us to get rid of Harley. However, to argue this in their tape, the prototype needed Harley. So after the big reveal, the prototype says there was once an Ollie. However, he has been gone for a very long time, meaning the prototype likely killed Ollie. The conversation conversation that follows is super important, and at first glance, the finer details definitely fly over your head. But let's really analyze what's said here. The prototype says he's going to come get Poppy and kill everyone else, meaning he's not going to be killing Poppy. Rather, he has something very special prepared for her. She will never want to leave. I'm not sure what that could be, but it's probably nothing fun. Now, Poppy goes on about how the prototype lied to her, and he says it's because she kept missing the point. This is important, keep this in mind. He then explains how he took the explosives we set up and put them to good use, meaning they are directly under us, which is why we fall down later. The prototype continues, revealing that he put Poppy in her case in hopes that she would see things differently. It's always been about her and him, what they are. That's not a truth that can be burnt away. Those 3 lines are extremely important. Now, this monologue isn't done yet, but it's important to understand what it all means before I continue. To do this, we need to take a look at what Poppy said in her VHS tape, a tape that a lot of people seem to miss, but I'll play it here just in case.
It was awful. So awful. I didn't want... This wasn't what I thought we were gonna leave. Leave the factory. Not this. All those people. Prototype says we can't leave. Not now, not ever. I hate him. I hate him, and I hate this place, and I hate that he's... right. He explained everything, and he's right. We can't leave. It's too risky. What they did to us, we can't ever let it happen to us or anyone ever again. Doesn't make me feel better about the bodies, though. What he was saying about them. I know there's not really another option. The toys will starve otherwise. They'll die. But it's still disgusting. I wish you were here, Dad. I could really use one of your talks right about now. You'd know what to say. When you were running this place, you always knew what to say. I miss you.
This tape just revealed something that has been right in front of our faces this entire time. And no, I'm not talking about her father being Elliot. She begins by saying it was awful. She didn't want, this wasn't what she thought they were going to leave. Leave the factory, not this. Poppy is talking about the Hour of Joy, meaning the prototype convinced Poppy that the Hour of Joy was going to allow the experiments to all leave. But obviously that didn't happen, meaning he lied to Poppy about the plan. After it went down, Poppy met with him again. This is why she left Safe Haven. He told her they can't leave the factory. Not now, not ever. So this proves that he did in fact lie to her. She then goes on about how she hates him for this, and she hates that he's right. They can't leave, it's too risky. They can't let what happened to them happen to anyone else. This is huge and reveals that the prototype doesn't actually want anyone to leave, because if they do, word of the Bigger Bodies Initiative will get out, and the experiments won't stop. The prototype is not trying to escape. He is not the bad guy here. He is trying to protect the kids and put an end to the Bigger Bodies Initiative. This is why he took all the orphans down into the labs, to preserve their lives, because if they escape, again, the Bigger Bodies Initiative will get out. Yes, the experiments killed people during the Hour of Joy, but to the prototype, this was a necessary evil for the greater good. Something had to change to put a stop to Playtime Co. The prototype is not a villain. He never was. This explains why he put Poppy in her case. She is trying to escape the factory. Poppy reached out to us, she needed our help to get the toys out. Meaning in an attempt to stop her, he threw her in the case. So the prototype has been trying to stop anyone, even the other toys, from escaping. This is why he wants to kill us, Kissy, and the rest of the friendly toys. It's not because he's evil, it's because he just wants to stop the experiments. Like I've been saying, if the toys escape, the experiments will continue. This was the point Poppy was missing. the bigger picture. After all, she's just a child, she likely doesn't understand. Poppy, of course, then reveals that her father is Elliot Ludwig, which brings us back to their conversation. What they are. Father and daughter. Obviously this isn't confirmed, but I think it's very obvious at this point. The prototype is likely Elliot Ludwig, Poppy's father. He even says it's time to come home. Home to her case, a case located inside Elliot Ludwig's apartment, his old home. To explain why Poppy doesn't address the prototype as her father is because she doesn't see him as her father anymore. To her, he is a monster, not the loving dad she remembers. She doesn't understand the bigger picture of what he's trying to do. At least, that's how I interpret it. Following this bombshell of information, us and Kissy fall down from the explosion. Kissy's fate, again, just like in Chapter 3, is unknown. We ultimately make our way to the darkest part of the factory, the labs, where all of the experiments on innocent children took place. We also know that this is where the prototype resides. Him along with the other still alive orphans that have been sleeping for 10 years. I think this can be explained by the red smoke. It keeps them in a sort of hibernation. That being said, before we enter, we see there are a ton of poppy flowers that the company would grow for the red smoke. For some reason, this area is incredible to me. It's so simple, they're just flowers, but the reasoning behind them is so dark. It's really cool to see. Back to what I was saying, this also reveals that someone, maybe the prototype, is still actively growing them. Or perhaps another human. Either way, after 10 years, these would be dead. So someone is clearly still growing these flowers. I assume it's for the red smoke. Keeping children asleep for 10 years likely uses a lot of it. So that's why they are still being grown. Now, the prototype story in Chapter 4 ends here. He blew up Safe Haven, revealed himself to be Ollie, and hinted at his relation with Poppy. Therefore, we did get a few questions answered, however, there is still a lot of mystery surrounding the character. In Chapter 5, we will enter inside the labs and finally meet the prototype face to face. He will likely reveal his plan and hopefully tell us who he really is. Chapter 4 gave us some incredible locations inside the darkest parts of the factory. However, inside this darkness lies a small glimmer of light. Light that represents hope. And this was Safe Haven, the beating heart of the friendly experiments. This location was not just a place to keep everyone safe, but it was a home. And inside this home tells a compelling yet tragic tale. So let's uncover the untold story of Safe Haven. Before Safe Haven was turned into a beacon of hope, it was actually used for something similar by the staff of Playtime Co., and was even called Safe Haven. The place was constructed by the construction company Warren Batch. This company was presumably what built all of the underground locations beneath the factory. Playtime Co. decided to use Warren Batch because they were a small family-owned company, meaning Playtime Co. could pay them an incredible amount for that time period, which would make them keep their mouths shut about what they were building. And of course, they had to sign a contract.
In 1972, you signed a contract, a legally binding piece of paper that says whatever is asked of you, you do it. We asked. You did. In 1990, you signed another, a renewal. In it, had you bothered at all to read it, you'd have found a small clause. Any and all directives will be accomplished in the appropriate time and with appropriate compensation should the project be completed to satisfaction.
Now, the reason for building Safe Haven was to create a reinforced, easily defendable central location for security staff. It would be equipped with blast doors, defenses, and multiple emergency entrances and exits. In other words, this location would keep the staff safe from any rogue experiments that got loose. Safe Haven would be powered by an independent electrical network with its own on-site generator. This would allow the location to run separately from the rest of the facility. If power was cut, Safe Haven would not be affected. It was equipped with a series of high voltage electrical coils which would be used to deter intruders. If anyone got too close, they would be electrocuted. It was also installed with reinforced blast doors capable of withstanding very high amounts of pressure. These doors would be used for 3 to 4 exterior pathways, each with fail-safes. Of course, it would also include a discrete emergency elevator system for transporting key personnel from the upper floors. This would allow for safe passage to the surface if things got out of hand. However, for some reason, this location would not be enough to keep the staff alive for very long after the events of the Hour of Joy. So for the friendly experiments that survived, they took it over and made themselves a new home. This would be their beacon of hope. They were safe here, safe from the Doctor and the prototype. Although, as we know, this safety would not last forever. While small compared to the rest of the facility, the importance of Safe Haven was immeasurable. Like I've been saying, it's not just a safe location, it's a place for the experiments to call home. At a time like this, that was all that really mattered. This feeling is something they rarely experienced while under Playtime Co.'s control. So it's important to them, and at first glance, there is a lot going on. It has a bunch of rooms, drawing on the walls, and even a few secret areas. That being said, in Chapter 4, when we first enter, we walk in from the location showers. They've been turned into an all-purpose room, including storage, food, trash, and even beds. As you will see, there was not a lot of room for all the friendly experiments, so they had to make do with what they had. Once entering the main room, we can see even more beds, a small goods store, a goal for play, tons of toys, and all of the remaining friendly experiments. Remember, these experiments are just kids, so the location's appearance reflects that. They've tried their best to make the place feel like home with all of the drawings and friendly touches. If we look up, there is a massive PJ Pug-a-Pillar toy. Considering he's not moving, I don't think he's alive, rather it's just a toy. The medic plays a very small role in Chapter 4, however this doesn't make him any less important. He was the doctor that took care of the injured experiments within Safe Haven. His appearance is identical to Boogiebot except the medic is red and not green. He also has a white cross on his arm that represents first aid. It's unknown if this experiment was ever a toy for Playtime Co., but we can assume he was since most of the others were. Now, there is a security feed tape with audio that depicts an injured toy receiving help from the medic after said toy was presumably attacked by the nightmare critters. Hoppy Hopscotch and this unnamed toy were bringing supplies from Safe Haven to Playcare when the attack happened.
I need some help here! Hey, watch the door! Watch the door!
Right here. On the mattress.
There you go, bud. You're okay.
Okay, look at me. I'm a mess.
Hoppy? What's going on?
We were trying to bring supplies back up to the elevator, but we got jumped. Had to turn all the way back around.
They took everything we had. Right after one of them picked my leg.
How is he, Doc? Not too bad. He'll live.
See?
He'd bite clean. Could get infected otherwise.
So, what do we do now?
For starters, you two stay here tonight. Let things settle down outside. I'll find more food for you to bring up to Playcare. When you're ready.
Thanks, Doey. Sorry we lost the supplies. It won't happen again.
The important thing is you're both okay. Aside from that bite, that is. Hey, Doc, let me grab some wound cream for our pal here.
This tape took place 5 years and 7 months after the Hour of Joy. When we, the player, see the medic, he examines Kissy Missy's wounds and takes care of her. Honestly, there's not much to be said about this character, but I felt he was important to bring up considering he helps out the other toys. This medic has been keeping them alive for the past 10 years, but unfortunately, he presumably dies from the explosion in Safe Haven. The most interesting part of this center room are all the drawings on the walls, and they paint us a picture of what the toys had to go through. This first wall has a massive drawing of Catnap exhaling the red smoke while the prototype's hand is above him. This of course symbolizes he was under the control of the prototype. As we know from chapter 3, Catnap worshipped him as a god. You'll notice all the other smiling critters and even the kids that were affected by the red smoke. Interestingly, they are holding empty plates with writing saying they're not eating that. So hungry hungry and their tummy hurts. This is a callback to when Dog Day told us that the experiments were starved for not joining Catnap and the prototype. The ones that did were fed, so the bigger body smiling critters were starved to death and killed. This drawing reminds us of that. There is also the text, "Together we are safe," with Doey, Kissy, and Dog Day. This is a reminder that they had strength in numbers and to stick together. The toys even drew their favorite foods. As nice as this is, it's a reminder that the experiments were so hungry they began to fantasize about the foods they craved. It's a harsh reality, but drawing the food gave them hope that one day they will get to eat their favorite foods again. Now, behind this door lies a bathroom that more or less has been turned into a room with toys, a bed, and a sheet with Mom written on it. You'll see this around Safe Haven as well. It's clear that these children miss their real parents. The other side of the wall sheds some light on how the toys were really feeling. They would draw themselves as people again, mentioning how they miss doing things like swimming. It's pretty sad to think about. It also shows these smiling critters crying together, wondering if they will ever be saved. There is even a drawing of Doey protecting them. However, they're all frowning because they were scared. Scared of what the future held and scared that they would never get their lives back. You might have also noticed this drawing of Poppy with a large red X, saying she left us. Where are you? We need you, Poppy. This is a drawing we will see more of inside of Safe Haven. When Poppy left to speak with the prototype, she was put inside her case and never returned. So the other toys got worried and wondered where she was, leading to them drawing these pictures of her. This reveals that Poppy was an important figure for these toys, and her absence affected them more than we will probably ever know. There are also smaller drawings that are just as impactful, like this one of a hangman game spelling out hope. It includes a child, a pet named Bruno, her mother, father, a house, and the text, "I miss home." A reminder that these experiments, rather orphans, still reminisce about what once was their old life. Now, the room behind the door on this wall is not another bathroom. This seems to be a shrine room dedicated to all of the late experiments, rather orphans, that lost their lives to their fight for freedom. The room is filled with tons of candles and poppy flowers, as a poppy flower is all they can get while inside the facility. A mini Bobby Bear Hug is also down on his knees, presumably praying or paying his respects to the friends he lost. This reminds us that these experiments have feelings too. The drawing on the wall confirms this. It depicts all of the toys fighting, mentioning, "We are losing, we must win, I don't want to die," and 40 dead. The toys fought for their lives and put up a fight against the doctor and the prototype, however fell short and lost up to 40 of them. Just this drawing alone tells a tragic story, but shows us they had courage to fight for their lives. I think this room is a reminder that these still alive experiments are people too, and above all, they care for each other. Now, inside Safe Haven, there are 5 rooms, each with their own significance. The first is the showers, which I already touched on. They are kind of an all-purpose room. The second is the auxiliary power room. This is where Safe Haven's off-the-grid generator is located. You might have noticed there are a ton of power cells around the center room. These were used over the years to power this generator. As we know, during Chapter 4, the generator needs to be repaired, but to access it, you need the Omni Hand. This is where we come in, to acquire the hand after defeating the doctor and use it to repair the generator. However, while this generator is down, the security measure is also down, meaning the prototype would be allowed to get in. This is something we will see later on. That's about it for this room, it just holds the generator. The third room is shipping, and this is where the elevator is located for moving important staff to and from the surface. Now, like this room suggests, this room is for shipping items to the surface and vice versa. To be honest, I'm not entirely sure what they would have been sending down here or up there. Most of the boxes are Warren batch, so maybe tools and whatnot. That being said, it's likely for sending supplies to the staff that are down here without raising attention. I'm sure if someone saw you sending surgical tools down, they would probably ask why. There are also a few Boxy Boo toy boxes down here. This could hint that we'll see him in Chapter 5. The fourth room is labeled storage. This was likely where staff would keep important things. However, it seems to have been turned into a hangout spot for the toys. There's even a Kissy Missy toy just chilling out and reading a book. Speaking of books, this room is filled with them, so this could also be a library of sorts. Since there wasn't much to do for fun around the location, reading was probably one of their only options. Interestingly though, almost all of the books are about Playtime Co. or their characters, meaning the company only allowed the experiments to read books about them and not the outside world. There is also a brawn couch with a bunch of Huggy and Kissy pillows. Honestly, I wish there was more to say about this room, but it just looks like a hangout spot. The last room is the most interesting. This is the infirmary, a place where toys can get medical attention. There are a bunch of medical beds and medical supplies. We even see it being used as Bobby Bearhug is laying on one of the beds, presumably injured, and Bubba Finn is comforting him. Again, this shows us that the experiments care for each other. To them, they are more than just toys. They are people too. Now, there is also another room attached to this infirmary. It seems to be an additional lounge area with tons of pillows and books. Most importantly, there is Kickin' Chicken and Kissy Missy just watching a blank screen with the sound of the Nightmare Critters theme song. Mommy Longlegs and a bunch of other toys are just lying around as well. This room reminds us that these toys still value the same things they did as kids, just hanging out, watching TV, and listening to music. These types of activities are not only fun for kids, but it allows the experiments to remember their past lives. So while it's cool to see them just hanging out, it also reminds you of who they once were. Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end. Once we return to Safe Haven, it's completely destroyed. The mini critters are all dead and the place is left in ruin. Once again, another good story ends in tragedy. As I've been saying, Safe Haven was a beacon for hope for these experiments. It was all they really had left. This was their new home. But remember, they are still just kids. They like to draw, play with toys, read, and watch TV. These toys are grasping at whatever human life they have left and holding on to it here. They even support a shrine to their fallen friends, rather family, in hopes to never forget what once was. Like I've been saying, this place reminds us that these experiments are people too. But unfortunately, just like everything inside of Playtime Co., Safe Haven ends in tragedy as it turns into ruin and the remaining experiments perish with it. The story of Safe Haven shows us that even when there's hope, Playtime Co. always seems to rip it away. That was all of the significant characters in Chapter 4. I'll be diving much deeper into each one later down the line, but until then, thank you so much for making it this far in the video. Let me know your thoughts about these characters in the comments below, and if you like horror game content like this, please consider subscribing. Also, I just made a Discord server, so if you want to chat with me, I recommend joining. And if you want to support the channel more, you can become a member. Don't forget to follow my Twitter at TerrifyT. Thanks for watching.